Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Today we are going to continue with our quick study of Dion Fortune's Book of the Dead. Peace, peace. Okay, let me know if you can hear me, and let me know if the music is too loud. All right. Well, let's begin with chapter 9. The hidden side of death. The processes even of physical death are not nearly so simple as popular imagination believes, and it was the knowledge of the subtler aspects of death that gave rise to many of the funeral practices of the ancients, which we look upon today as pure superstition. Let's see. Karma, angels, astral plane, and the heaven world. That's chapter 11. Okay. Peace, Tian Pomeroy. Peace, MC Maestro. Peace, Indigo Black Bird. Society Ejects. Peace, peace. Processes, even of physical death, are not nearly so simple as popular imagination believes, and it was a knowledge of the subtler aspects of death that gave rise to many of the funeral practices of the ancients, which we look upon today as pure superstition. With the passing of the breath, the soul itself is gone and is no more concerned with its cast-off body than the chick with the eggshell. But those who remain are concerned with it, and certain of the subtler but those who remain are concerned with it being the body. And certain of the subtler problems of the shock of bereavement are due to the little understood processes that are going on the discarded clay. Peace, peace, sunshine chick. WVT, peace, peace. We have two tasks to perform before our service to our loved one is finished. We must see to it that dust returns to dust as swiftly and harmoniously as possible, giving rise to none of those happenings which may be termed the pathologies of death. And we ought to follow up the departing soul with the right kind of telepathic communication until it is safely established on the other side, and will want to enter into its rest for a period. These two aspects of the last services to the departed are of very great importance, and we ought to give them our serious attention. Moreover, there is nothing that will help us in our grief so much as to feel that there is still something to be done for those who have gone over, and that we are not free to let ourselves go unreservedly in a paroxysm of emotion as we might do if we felt that we had nothing but ourselves to consider. So, as a quick recap, those two services that she mentioned are making sure that dust returns to dust as quickly as possible, and the second being are delivering of proper communion and communication telepathically with those who have passed on. Proper communication being encouragement and positive vibes, so to speak. Definitely none of the, oh, I wish you were still here and everything's all messed up now and I just can't go on without you. None of that stuff. Vince Cashmere, good to see you. Archer Energy, peace. Nick, peace. Nick says, still 4 books behind, checking in though, peace. Saigon, peace, peace. Love and B, greetings. Eric Jones, peace. So, let us study first what happens to the discarded and empty body immediately after the departure of the soul. For this will guide us in our attitude toward it and our manner of dealing with it. Firstly, the departure of the soul only means the death of the central nervous system. There is a great deal of organic life still left in the body itself. It does not die all in one piece. Veronica, good to see you. That's interesting to note. The departure of the soul only means the death of the central nervous system. There is a great deal of organic life still left in the body itself. It does not die all in one piece. Instead, for some days before death, or even longer, the soul may have been out of the body, floating at the end of the silver cord a few feet above the bed, looking like a sleeping ghost and clearly visible to any psychic. Interesting. Now, I recall in reading some of the yoga books a year ago on this live stream, and now we talked about, I think it was it was either in the Agora book or in the Awakening the Kundalini Serpent book. I forgot what the actual title is. But it was in one of those two, where he talked about how if you learn how to sense prana and read prana, a person who is about to die, their prana usually starts to evacuate 6 weeks, 6 months or 6 weeks before they actually die. Interesting. So, indeed, for some days before death, or even longer, the soul may have been out of the body, floating at the end of a silver cord a few feet above the bed, looking like a sleeping ghost and clearly visible to any psychic. While this condition prevails, there is deep unconsciousness on all planes and no suffering. It is only when the silver cord is severed that the soul finally departs and actual death occurs. Al Dickey, peace. MC Maestro says, I remember that in Agora, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty certain it was Agora. While this condition prevails, there is deep unconsciousness on all planes and no suffering. It is only when the silver cord is severed that the soul finally departs and actual death occurs. The sudden rally and return of consciousness at the end is caused by the soul, which recovers consciousness on its own plane as the end approaches, making a last effort to concentrate on the body in order that the process known to occultists as the etching of the seed atom may take place effectually. Has anybody heard that phrase, the etching of the seed atom? If not, maybe write that down and look it up. The etching of the seed atom. This seed atom is a nucleus of force of the same type as that of the physical plane, which is retained by the soul throughout its evolution, and which plays an important part in the processes of rebirth. The term etching is, of course, metaphorical and represents the tuning of the nucleus to a certain type of vibration and its impression with certain images. If this has already been done, the soul is ripe for death, and the last rally may not take place. Therefore, the absence of this rally does not mean that the processes of death are not going on as they should. On the other hand, when violent death takes place, if the body is so shattered that death is instantaneous, no etching of the seed atom is possible. Therefore, it is held by esotericists that the soul immediately seeks rebirth before the second death takes place, and equally rapidly passes out again, having merely assumed a physical body long enough to enable it to make its exit from life into form. Ooh. Interesting. Archer Energy says, what's the silver cord that's attached to the body? Well, that's a concept that is commonly spoken about in astral projection and astral travel. If I had to give it a definition, I would say it is an extension of the chakra points from the etheric body up into the astral body, up into the mental body. So that essence of self that extends between each body, physical, etheric, astral, mental. So imagine if there's like one small cord that connects all of them together. That's why when you dream, when you astral project and lucid dream, you've got that silver cord that connects your body to your floating consciousness. And it doesn't get broken. It doesn't get broken until it's actually time to die. And once it is broken, what it's actually broken from is from the physical body. So the etheric body separates from the physical. The physical begins the process of death. Meanwhile, the consciousness continues with the other bodies. It has often been remarked by mothers and midwives that the newborn child, which has an extraordinary appearance of intelligence and maturity in its eyes, is not going to live. Oh, I get what she's saying here. So keep in mind what she said just now about the etching of the seed form. How she mentioned that as the soul approaches death, it's as if, you know how they say like your life flashes before your eyes or something like that. There's an aspect of consciousness that displays a certain number of images, right? And those images, in a way, are kind of like tuning your consciousness to go to the next level. In the Vedic text, it also talks about how in the last moments of life, you're supposed to fixate your awareness on Vishnu or Shiva, right? Or some type of higher deity, because that last thing that you focus your attention on is the direction of where you're going. But she talked about here where there's a violent death and having that last moment of focus isn't possible. It sounds like what she's saying is that the soul instantly seeks another body to quickly be able to play out those last moments properly. She says here, therefore it is held by esotericists that the soul immediately seeks rebirth before the second death takes place, and equally rapidly passes out again. So the soul doesn't just seek a body after physical or violent death where you don't get to do that last minute etching. She says that the soul doesn't just seek a body, but it seems like a body that is going to die is sought out. So if you're able to extend your imagination in the bigger scheme of things, I wonder how many bodies there are that are born and die right away. And maybe it isn't actually a bad thing, right? If we step away from morality, maybe there's a bigger process going on. Maybe some of these things need to happen for the vast number of people who are dying violent deaths. Something interesting to think about. MC Maestro says, in dreams I try to practice focus on the tree if I die in that dream. Yeah, I think the consistent practice of meditation and Tritaka and Dharana, I think that having that consistent practice day after day, week, month, year after year, in a way prepares the soul to be able to do this without having to scramble in its last minute. The typical person doesn't meditate like that, so they're the ones that are scrambling in the last minute. Anna Molly, peace. So she continues to say here, therefore it is held by esotericists that the soul immediately seeks rebirth before the second death takes place, and equally rapidly passes out again, having merely assumed a physical body long enough to enable it to make its exit from life in due form. It has often been remarked by mothers and midwives that the newborn child, which has an extraordinary appearance of intelligence and maturity in its eyes, is not going to live. It is the eyes of an adult soul that they see looking at them, and all the service that soul requires at their hands is the rites of burial according to its faith. It is not meant to live. It is only meant to die adequately. Interesting. So no, she's not saying that a baby with old eyes is supposed to die. What she's saying is that oftentimes, when a fully grown adult chooses to reincarnate immediately like that, one of the telltale signs is through the eyes, especially if that baby dies prematurely. That seems to have been a karmic thing finishing out from the previous life. Cosmic Traveler, peace. Zach M, peace, peace. It may seem that this inflicts a hardship on the mother who has made her great sacrifice to bring it into the world only to lose it. But if we examine the karmic record of the case, and no occultist would ever attempt to judge a matter in the light of a single incarnation, hint, hint, ladies and gentlemen, we shall find either that there is a karmic debt owing, which is settled in this way, or if no such debt can be traced, then karmic credit has been given. This karmic credit is a point that is often forgotten. Sometimes the lords of karma owe us a debt which entitles us to one of those sudden strokes of pure luck, which we can explain by means of no hypothesis which only takes account of one life. The Good Samaritan, the complete stranger who renders us a totally unexpected service, may be a soul for whom we have opened the gates of birth and death in a previous life. That's good. If we examine the karmic record of the case, we can Surely, no occultist would ever attempt to judge a matter in the light of a single incarnation. Surely. I've heard plenty of people talk about a karmic debt, but I've literally heard nobody talk about a karmic credit. I mean, I've had the concept in my head. I've just never heard anybody actually talk about a karmic credit. Karma Police. Six the Gypsy. Good evening. Peace to you. Restless man, he talks in maths. Buzz like a fridge, like a detuned radio. Santriez Taylor, peace, peace. Hope you wonderful folks are having a great evening. Seems that times have been a bit strenuous as of late. So I hope that those strenuous times are coming to an end for all of us. Once the soul has safely withdrawn, however, there is an immediate change. Any sensitive person can feel the difference between the atmosphere of the chamber of death, however peaceful, and the atmosphere of the chamber of the dead. I like that distinction. Let me read that again. Any sensitive person can feel the difference between the atmosphere of the chamber of death, however peaceful, and the atmosphere of the chamber of the dead. During life, a man is under the lordship of the archangel of his race and the savior of his religion. But after death, his domination is withdrawn, or rather, it follows the soul and leaves the body to its own devices as being no longer of any concern. The vacant clay then passes under the dominion of the regents of the elements, the elementals, the elemental kings and queens, and the elemental forces of earth, air, fire, and water each withdraw that which belongs to them and restore it to its own kingdom. Check that out. Notice how she said that when the soul leaves the body is no longer under the dominion of your particular archangel or even your savior, right? She's talking about your lunar and solar aspect. She's talking about Gabriel and Michael, or you can find that out yourself later. Once the soul leaves the body returns to Malkuth, which is ruled over by the four elements. And what does she say? She says that these elemental forces each withdraw what belongs to them. This body that you're walking around in, it's not even yours. It's borrowed. It's a borrowed, concentrated effort from the kingdom of the elementals. And the evidence and proof of that is that they always claim it back once your service is done. It doesn't matter what you believe, that body will absolutely go back to its owners. Really cool. So the body belongs to Malkuth. There's an aspect of you that belongs to Yesod, and that will be the archangel of your race. And there's an aspect of you that belongs to Tifereth, and that would be the symbolic savior of your religion. I make that distinction not to say, oh, well, nothing you do matters or anything like that. Why I'm making that distinction about the elemental aspects of your body is to consider that there are a great number of things that we do and think and feel that are actually influenced by these elements, right? This is why there's this big question about free will. What is free will? And is it a thing that everyone has? And when I ask that question, I'm talking about influence. Yeah, sure, everyone chooses and makes a choice. But what is it that makes you choose one thing or another? When we talk about free will, it goes before the choice. It goes up to the influence level. And we're all influenced by those aspects of our elements, emotions, habits, the things that we eat, the things that we don't do. All these are influences that are likely created before we became mature thinking, I want to say adults, but there aren't too many of those that I've met in this lifetime. The fact that you tune into this live stream, or rather I should say the things that you've done before tuning into this live stream, everything that you do is influenced by an elemental force. That's the human life. So that's the human life. So when we talk about the soul, when we talk about the higher self and developing these higher qualities, we're talking about things that are beyond the influence of the elements. And for many, many, many people, that aspect of self has to be cultivated. It isn't hard to believe that there are a great number of people who don't have that aspect of self cultivated, meaning that they are completely composed of elemental forces. You know, people talk about NPCs, but I don't think it's so wise to consider people NPCs like that. You know, everyone does have an opportunity to cultivate that fifth element, but it's about whether or not a person makes the choice to cultivate that aspect of self. It's a difficult decision to make. It's easier to mate, feed, kill, and repeat. Mate, feed, kill, repeat. 4 elements. That's what every living body does. But there's a fifth aspect that has to be cultivated. And if that aspect isn't cultivated, what part of you actually goes to the angel of your race or the savior of religion? Something to think about. Or not. Let's go. So the vacant clay then passes under the dominion of the regents of the elements, and the elemental forces of earth, air, fire, and water each withdraw that which belongs to them and restore it to its own kingdom. I'm going to highlight that. To talk about the elementals is always fascinating because for some reason they seem to be much overlooked. In this process, they are assisted by a certain type of life which belongs to the most primitive form of existence and which is fast passing out of manifestation. I refer to the unicellular organisms that live on dead matter, the saprophytic bacteria which causes decomposition. I like that word, saprophytic. Saprophytic. I have no idea what that means. Occult topics with the professor. Peace and greetings. Useless familiar. Peace. Saprophytic. The parasitic bacteria which feed upon the living tissues and cause disease are another matter. They belong to certain forms of life whose day is overpast and who, defying the law of evolution, refuse to withdraw from the physical plane. They are rebels against cosmic law, and advancing knowledge is gradually driving them out of manifestation. That's a really cool concept. Let's check that out here. So she's talking about that there are certain types of organisms that have outstayed their welcome. Let me read that again, and then we'll talk about it just a little bit. The parasitic bacteria which feed upon living tissues and cause diseases are another matter. They belong to certain forms of life whose day is overpast and who, defying the law of evolution, refuse to withdraw from the physical plane. They refuse. These are cliphotic entities, guys. They are rebels against cosmic law, and advancing knowledge is gradually driving them out of manifestation. In other words, The fact that we have the science to cure diseases and to eliminate certain type of sickness in human beings goes to show that these things are quickly losing their purpose. They don't need to be here anymore. But like all life, it fights to exist against all odds. But its time is up. It belongs to the clip off. And it's going there. Just like how people talk about science is causing people to live longer and all sorts of advancements in health, these things that we are overcoming through our study and our practice and mastery over the physical plane, we're causing type of life forms to become extinct. And if a life form becomes extinct, that's because its racial purpose is done. It's completed its task. So don't cry over the dinosaurs. Don't cry over the whales. Don't cry over any extinct species. If it's time to be extinct, then it's time to go. Thank you, Society Ejects. Society Ejects says saprotrophic nutrition or isotrophic nutrition is a process of chemoheterotrophic extracellular digestion involved in the processing of decayed organic matter. It occurs in saprotrophs and is most often associated with fungi and soil bacteria. Okay. Anna Molly, thank you. Anna Molly says, means obtaining food by absorbing dissolved organic material. Quintessence Luminescence says it's completed its mission and purpose. Absolutely. Big Mama Zar, peace. Big Mama Zar says, hey Trav, do you have a specific schedule for when you go on live? I always jump in halfway through or end up having to watch the replay. Well, I try my absolute best to go live at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on a Saturday evening, which is today. So whatever 8 p.m. Eastern Time is for you. To be honest, I started 30 minutes ago, which means that I was 30 minutes late. So whatever time it is for you now, go an hour back, and that's usually when I start. Society Eject says, yes, we can see that with chickenpox. I haven't met anyone that had chickenpox yet after 2000. Right. That's an example of a certain life form that has completed its task. It's no longer necessary. And it has been withdrawn from the physical plane. You know, just like polio and all kinds of other crazy diseases that we used to have. And just think, perhaps one day, the human race will meet that same fate. Can you believe that there have been races of humans that are no longer with us anymore? Whole races that we'll never see again. Okay, let's continue with this text. The curious feel of the death chamber and fear that most people have of a dead body, are caused by this opening of the gates of the elemental kingdoms. Ooh, death, the opening of the gates of the elemental kingdoms. I like that. Because you got to think, like, when certain things happen, it doesn't matter how cool or badass or tough you think you are. You kind of have to stop and at least respect nature. Like, you know, standing next to a volcano or an earthquake or a tornado or something way beyond our social experience. Certain things like that give you a certain kind of feeling. Has anybody actually been through a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake? That would be an example of the elemental kingdom opening their gates. I've been through a hurricane and a tornado. Inside of Eject says, yes, I've been through a flood. Yeah. So if we're gonna introduce all four elements, that would even include a fire. The curious feel of the death chamber and the fear that most people have of a dead body are caused by this opening of the gates of the elemental kingdoms. The beings of the elements are present and active when organic matter has to be disintegrated and returned to its respective spheres. Sensitive people feel their presence, and because elementals belong to a very primitive form of life, find them disturbing. It is for this reason that it is not good for the living to remain in the immediate neighborhood of the dead. There are, however, four mighty archangels who are called the archangels of the elements because they rule the elemental kingdoms as overlords in the name of God. These are Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, and Uriel, and they equate with the four evangelists of the Christian tradition. Hence the Child's Prayer, four angels round my bed, two at the foot and two at the head. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, guard the bed that I lie on. Anna Molly says, windstorm almost killed me on the river. Safe on land, but not in a rowboat. That sounds pretty scary. Sheesh. Quintessence Luminescence says primitive or primordial. I'd say both. I would say both. Definitely primordial. Every rite for the dead ought to commit the clay into the care of these four great spirits before the throne. And by the way, I had no idea that this book was going to touch so much on elemental forces. But in case you don't know, typically we can attribute the four races of elementals, gnomes, sylphs, undines, and salamanders. They're under the presidency of their four elemental kings. And even though the human society has like a king that sits on a throne and a queen, and what happens is that when one of them dies or something, the next person comes to fulfill that position, right? So understand that when we talk about certain ranks in the spirit world, it's not that any one spirit is ruling that position for eternity. Most of these names of spirits that we hear are actually ranks, and when one being outstays its welcome, either to evolve or whatever, another takes its place. So, and I get this from studying the Vedic information. There's not just one Vishnu or one Krishna. Those are ranks that are interchangeable. So when you see the elemental king of the earth, Gob, that's not one specific earth elemental. Same thing for these archangels. Same thing for any type of spirit you work with, right? The Andros that I worked with when I was working with Goetia is no longer the Andros that is currently occupying that space. So on and so forth. That's evolution. You can even say that about Christ. You can say that about any deity that you've ever worked with. Let's continue. So every rite for the dead ought to commit the clay into the care of these four great spirits before the throne. When they are invoked, it will be found that the somewhat sinister atmosphere sometimes felt in a death chamber will immediately lift and clear. The return to dust of the body, however, is but half the process of physical death, and there is another body, equally physical, equally mortal, which is called the etheric double. It might aptly be called the body of electricity, for it is an organized system of electromagnetic stresses, and in its meshes, every cell and fiber of the physical body lies like a bottle in a bottle rack. That's a great description, Dion Fortune. You're always good at doing that. Side Eject says that's why so many rituals don't require the old-fashioned way, as like sacrificing animals and whatnot. Absolutely, absolutely. As above, so below. The people who call on these deities are not the same people who called on these deities 300 years ago. So as the people changed, the culture changed, so did these deities. The ranks are still the same, but the conversations are different. Interesting to think about. Which makes it kind of funny to see people like arguing online about, oh, you have to call him King Payman, and you didn't do this and that by the book, and da 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 da. Arguing online when both of them are incorrect. That stuff isn't necessary. Let's continue. So yeah, I like what you said here. The etheric double could actually be called the body of electricity. Why? Because it is an organized system of electromagnetic stresses, and in its meshes, every cell and every fiber of the physical body lies like a bottle in a bottle rack. You catch that image? Think about a wine rack holding a bunch of wine bottles. Well, those wine bottles could be every cell of the physical body, and the wine rack itself is the etheric body. That's why you might lose a finger or a hand or a limb, but you still feel it. They call it that phantom limb syndrome. Because the wine rack is still there, the wine bottles are gone. Yeah, that's a great explanation, Dion Fortune. I will be certain to reference that again. It transmits to every molecule of the body the vital force which keeps disintegration at bay and maintains the unstable compounds of organic matter in their elaborate and fugitive forms. It is the withdrawal of this etheric double which marks the critical moment of death when the breath is seen to pass. Embodied in it, the soul remains in an unconscious condition for a brief period. From a few hours to 3 days. If its tendency of the etheric body is prolonged beyond that time, or if the soul wakes up to consciousness while still in the etheric double, one of the pathologies of death has occurred. Uh-oh. And that's when we start feeding on other life forms and things of that nature. Quintessence Luminescence says Matryoshka of cellular containers. My phone just said service interrupted. Can you guys still hear me? Are we still going live? It says we are. If you still are on this video, go ahead and hit the like button because it looks like there are more people here than have actually liked the video. Excellent. Thank you, Big Mama Zar. Archer Energy asks, aren't these energies within us? I'm curious as to why you asked that question. I don't see anything here that has contradicted that. Maybe you're asking that question for a different reason. Because truth be told, all of this is quote unquote us. Us is not just the physical body. Us would be the physical body and the etheric body and the soul and all these little pieces. There's not an actual us. There's not an actual you. We're talking about, it's almost like you can look at the United States of America as a big thing, but when you really zoom in, you see that it's actually 50 states, and then you zoom in and you see it's composed of a bunch of different cities and counties and neighborhoods and districts and regions, right? So it's very difficult to move the United States as a whole. You have to start at the cellular level if you want to make massive change. Energy says, so why not work on you and oneself? question. But last I checked, I thought that's what we were doing. So let's continue doing that. It is this waking of the soul while still in its etheric double, which, in popular phrase, causes its ghost to walk. Within the appointed time, however, unless something abnormal occurs, the magnetic forces of this body of electricity will have been exhausted. It will be like a battery that has run down, and the soul will slip out of its meshes and no longer have any link with matter. So understand here, according to ancient occult stuff, I've said this a million times, you guys know this, the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, the mental body, etc. When we talk about the soul, at least in this case, you can go ahead and lump in the causal body, the mental body, and the astral body. So all these bodies are interconnected together, interwoven together, just like your layers of flesh. You got the epidermis and all these other dermises. So the physical body is actually contained in the etheric body. And the etheric body is actually connected to the astral body, which is connected to the mental body, and so on. So upon physical death, upon the death of the physical body, what happens is those other bodies start the process of detaching from each other. So that's what makes the physical life so important, is because this is the moment when all of our bodies are connected. Our physical self, our etheric aspect, our astral aspect, and so on. So that's why incarnation is such an important opportunity, because this is where you get your karma stuff done. It's very, very difficult to continue doing your karma stuff without a physical body, because this is the realm of karma. And if you don't have a body in the realm of karma, if you don't have any cards in the game, you can't play. All right, so I said all that to say, within the appointed time, however, unless something abnormal occurs, the magnetic forces of this etheric body of electricity will have been exhausted, and it will be like a battery that has run down, and the soul will slip out of its meshes and no longer have any link with matter. She says it will no longer have any link with matter. The emphasis I put there is, we've got a lot of people who claim to communicate with the dead, a lot of people who claim to speak with people who are no longer here. But I would challenge that notion and instead suggest that you're communicating with elemental forces. So Archer Energy says, aren't these energies within us? So why not work on you and oneself? MC Maestro responds, different paths for different minds. Our Western culture is structure based, so it'd be advantageous to use that as a tool rather than condemning it and running to more formless paths, like Buddhism or any other of radical unity, are meant for different dharma, and Trav and many others in the chat do not have. If unity works for you, keep down that path. Good answer. Okay, so a lot of people are actually not talking to the dead because the dead have no link with matter. What we're actually communicating with are elemental forces who have assumed the etheric image of that person that we think we're communicating with. That's mostly what's happening there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It can be very beneficial to communicate with elemental forces. It can also be easy to deceive yourself in dealing with elemental forces. The same way that you cannot have a body in this world without the elemental forces, it'll be difficult to. I mean, look, in order for your soul to have interaction with the physical plane, every other force has to have some type of elemental body, right? I don't know. I don't know. If your soul has to have a human body to interact with the physical plane, you gotta have an etheric body to interact with the imagination plane. So does everything else. We're not actually designed to have pure communication with pure soul, pure spirit. That's why we turn to symbols. That's why we use the form of gods and angels and all these other things. Our mind doesn't even comprehend pure source. Society Eject says, so Travis, I've been very curious about past life reading because I'm thinking, how is it that we can attain the memory from the past life but not remember what happened when we make the transition? Well, my experience on past life stuff, I would not say is to the level where I can speak confidently on it. I do have my own opinions about it. I think that what's actually happening, see, there's this big thing with the etheric plane and the astral plane where it's not formed, it's formless. And in order for us to interact with it, we give it a form, we give it a shape. That's why nothing is true, everything's permitted. So oftentimes, at least, like I said, I don't have much experience with it, but from what I'm able to surmise through dealing with peripheral stuff, is that we start to form a past life experience that is suitable through our subconscious mind, and we make it work. That might sound like a letdown, but shit. That's how everything else works. We give it a form, and we allow that form to influence us in the way that we need to be influenced. Now, if I have a couple of past life regressions and, I do some like past life work, maybe I'll have a different answer, who knows, but that's where I stand with it right now. I think, long story short, I believe the subconscious mind creates it because that story is useful and appropriate for us in some way. Zooman says, what about dead people who get stuck on Earth? That's not real. I think the previous chapters of what she talked about here gives a good explanation on that. Nobody stays here for too long because just like your physical body needs to eat food and absorb prana to continue, so does the etheric body have to do that. And if you do get quote unquote stuck here, it's going to be very difficult to find adequate food. See what I'm saying? Especially if nobody's like actually feeding you with offerings and all that stuff. To say it's not real? No, I wouldn't say that. Like I mentioned, the elemental forces of the etheric plane easily slip into those containers, those shapes. And once the soul leaves, those elementals fill in the space. Zooman, as a recommendation, Society Eject says Unseen Forces by Manly P. Hall goes into details about that too. Yeah, so check out Unseen Forces. Get that book on Amazon. It's only like $5. I also did an audio book reading review on it. All right. It is not this, however, that we call the second death. It is rather the second half of the physical death. And while it is going on, the soul is asleep in the deepest unconsciousness. It will now be seen why it is so unwise to try and get into touch with the soul immediately it has passed over. For we may wake it from its etheric sleep and cause it to walk. Do not let it be thought by this that the esotericist condemns communication with the departed, but there is a right and a wrong way of effecting this communication, and there are times when it might be safely and helpfully be done, and times when it had better be left alone, and we need to know these things if we are to deal with death rightly. Our modem thought, M-O-D-E-M, our modem thought places adults in the same position in relation to the mysteries of death that children endure in relation to the mysteries of birth. Interesting. I like that. I think that's supposed to be modern. Our modern thought places adults in the same position in relation to the mysteries of death that children endure in relation to the mysteries of birth. There's a conspiracy of silence which confuses the issue and places us at a grave disadvantage in dealing with our problems. Cool. So imagine what a little kid, a child, a baby thinks about birth. They don't know anything about that. They have no language. They have no symbols to relate to it. It's a complete mystery. They don't even know. They can't comprehend it. And that's the same thing with adults to death. It's the same thing. By the time we get there, we'll be able to explain it, but not before. Any better than a baby can explain his birth or what it took to get there. I like that. Dion Fortune is such a great writer. Okay, chapter 10, Purgatory. Who doesn't like a little bit of Purgatory? How are we doing? Is everybody understanding the content? Does anybody have any questions, comments? MC Maestro says Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula, was in The Golden Dawn at the same time as Dion Fortune. Interesting how they covered the same subject matter, as there was purportedly a magician who died and was causing trouble. I think she wrote Psychic Self-Defense after that too. Wow, that's really cool. I had no idea Bram Stoker was in The Golden Dawn, let alone at the same time as Dion Fortune. Yo, I gotta look into that. That's big. That's big. Society Eject says, when I show my daughter the video of her birth, you should see her face. Man. I saw it in person. Should have seen my face. Probably the same one your daughter had. Anna Molly says, just absorbing the knowledge. Me too. Chapter 10, Purgatory. We have already told of the merciful work of the great anesthetist, who causes a deep sleep to fall upon the soul as it passes out of the gates of the flesh. The etheric body fades and falls away from it unnoticed, and it sleeps on in that state of consciousness which occultists call the astral plane. But presently it begins to dream. The memories of its earth life are still present with it, though faint and far away, like the memories of early childhood. But it does not dream of these happenings as they appear to us who shared them. It reviews them instead from the point of view of its present state of existence. It is in the world of desire, and it sees them from the standpoint of fulfilled or frustrated desires. But the brain no longer clogging consciousness, the soul is not only conscious upon the plane of its present existence, but the higher consciousness is also awake and active. And all the time that this phantasmagoria of dream is going on, The higher self is holding up the mirror to consciousness and bidding the soul look therein upon its own image. All the time, the inexorable spiritual standards are kept before its eyes. The soul, forced to contemplate these, undergoes a struggle, severe in proportion to its deviation from the spiritual standards. Ugh. That's hands down probably going to be the toughest part. Looking back at your life through the lens of fulfilled or unfulfilled desires. Sheesh. Nothing explains these states so well as the terminology of analytical psychology. The soul is in the throes of a conflict between its higher and lower aspects. This conflict is subjective and expresses itself in the imagery of the astral dream. And the soul is said to be in purgatory, for purgatory is simply the forced realization of the significance of our own misdeeds. What is purgatory? She said that purgatory is simply the forced realization of the significance of our own misdeeds. Its scenery, so often described by saints and psychics, is such stuff as dreams are made on, the dreams of souls forced to face the truth. Spooky. This scenery, therefore, is by no means idly fantastic, but has definite symbolic relationship to the problems of the soul, of evolution, and of the cosmic reactions. Every soul has its own personal symbolism, derived from the experiences of its own history, even as we find in the psychoanalysis of dreams. Study ejects. I think that this is kind of what I was talking about when I mentioned these past lives being created by the subconscious mind in order to fulfill a specific purpose. Personal symbolism, so to speak. MC Maestro says Tantra and NLP is a proper godsend in the regard of neutralizing desires and our relation to them. I agree with that. In addition to this, it has the symbolism of the types of its religious faith, which it shares with all the members of its faith. Therefore, the hell of the Christian will differ in many ways from the hell of the Muslim. On the other hand, it will have much in common because there are certain type symbols which are common to all sentient human beings, being formed out of their common human experience, such as the pain of burning and the torture of thirst. Each individual soul is taught by these dream pictures that sin brings inevitable suffering, for it is shown the consequences of its wickedness or folly, and may not turn away its eyes. It feels in imagination as it would feel if it had actually come to the state which its dreams depict. Sisyphus, the ambitious, rolls his eternal stone up the hill and may not rest. Tantalus, the drunkard, sees the cup recede from his lips. Thus each learns the vanity of his weakness. Do y'all get this here? Customized to the individual, not a general hell. The initiate has never believed in the appalling doctrine of eternal punishment. You guys ever hear people posit the argument about Christian hell, and they say we're gonna burn in hell? Well, if you die, you ain't gonna have a physical body. How you gonna burn? Oh boy. Have you ever had a dream that felt so real? No psychic has ever confirmed this belief. Let's go back. The initiate has never believed in the appalling doctrine of eternal punishment. No psychic has ever confirmed this belief. No spirit returned from beyond the grave has ever reported it. What is there any man can do in the brief spell between birth and death to deserve it? But every spirit reports purgatory and has a wholesome respect for it. But these are not the flames of eternal punishment, but the cleansing fires that purify the soul, as gold is tried in the furnace, until all its dross are burned away. And it is pure and precious. It is not maintained, however, that the dross of an evolution can be all burnt away in the purgation of a single death. Few souls are so pure and strong that they could endure so severe a trial without their fibers being disintegrated. Therefore, we are shown no more at a single purgation. Therefore, we are shown no more at a single purgation that we can well bear and profit by. Makes sense. Makes sense. We are permitted to wipe out a certain portion of our karma and then come back to earth with the rest still bound around our neck. And it is this unexpiated karma that causes our suffering in the next life. And so gradually, with what we realize while in purgatory and with what we make amends for while on earth, we compensate our karma and adjust the balance. Thus does the soul make its growth. Indigo Blackbird says, phew, this ties into my questions about ancestral veneration and the land of living versus the land of the dead. I remember my grandmother saying the dead are dead. Now there's more context. Yeah. Decide Eject says, so I'm thinking when people condemn other people to hell, it's just their own construction of hell. Absolutely. There is only your personal version. And from what I've seen, it don't get no worse than this. And this ain't so bad. But although purgatory is primarily a subjective experience, it is not wholly subjective. The vivid dreams and feelings of the souls going through this experience create a very definite atmosphere about them. On the astral plane, there is no time and space as we understand them, but a mood is a place, and those who are in the same emotional state are drawn together. Remember that. You guys may have heard that before, I hope. I hope. Let me read it again just in case you haven't. But although purgatory is primarily a subjective experience, it is not wholly subjective. The vivid dreams and feelings of the souls going through this experience create a very definite atmosphere about them. On the astral plane, there is no time and space as we understand them, but a mood is a place, and those who are in the same emotional state are drawn together. Can we not readily understand how the atmosphere made by all the souls at present out of incarnation who are struggling with thwarted hate or unsatiated lust would mold the scenery of hell out of the plastic astral ethers? Oh my. Gregory Jones, peace. Gregory Jones says, just passing through to see everyone in this chat is awesome. And Magus, thanks for being you. Oh, I appreciate that. Indigo Blackbird says, enjoying this content. Such a great read. It's very practical, but doesn't miss any key points of the process. That's Dion Fortune. She the best. All those who hate, all those who lust, congregate together, and it is largely the cumulative atmosphere that they make between them which causes the abreaction of the higher type of soul, the soul that has possibilities of redemption. The minor transgression, which appears venial enough in ourselves, looks very different when we find ourselves in the midst of a sphere where innumerable souls are carrying it to all extremes, and we have to live in its atmosphere. Can y'all understand that? Can you grasp that? Can y'all see that in your head? Say, for example, I don't know, if you get really mad one day and lash out in anger at somebody, right? That's one thing. That doesn't really seem like it'll make such a colorful mark. But if you're someone who lives in anger and hatred, I mean, if you're someone who stews in it, who steams in it, who saturates in it, well then that's a specific television channel, that's a specific radio station, that's a specific vibration that you exist in. And what she's talking about here on the astral plane is there's people like that of all degrees huddled up together. There's your level of hatred and anger, and there are people who take it to the infinite extreme. Imagine that's that area of the astral plane, right? If you're someone with anger and you live in anger, right? I knew somebody who was like that. Always looking for somebody to fight, just mad, pissed off, short temper, fucking angry all the time. If they leave this world like that, they're most definitely going to find themselves in a place like that. But it doesn't just go for anger, of course. It goes for any type of emotional imbalance that we carry. She mentioned anger, she mentioned lust, she mentioned all kinds of different things. But what she's mentioning there is that when all these different types of souls get together, who stew and ruminate in those types of, in that type of atmosphere, that causes a negative reaction of the higher self. In a way, it kind of clouds your connection. She says the minor transgression, which appears venial enough in ourselves, looks very different when we find ourselves in the midst of a sphere, where the innumerable souls are carrying it to all extremes, and we have to live in its atmosphere. Now, when she says sphere like that, it makes me think of the tree of life and how the particular color set that we know and love is the tree of Bria. Interesting. MC Maestro says, sounds like the Goetia, entities of collective astral files. Yeah. Makes me think of the tree of the clip off. Archer Energy says we are reflections of each other. Condemning another is condemning oneself. Quintessence Luminescence says Magus, kindly remind us how to become aware of this clouded version of Shepherd Self, of Spirit Self. Well, a good way to think about it is to remember that you've got unconditioned consciousness that is perceiving reality through a physical body, through ego. And that physical body, that ego, creates this understanding of life based on the five senses. So out of our understanding of life based on the five senses, we develop habit patterns, we develop likes and dislikes, we develop this entire map of the world. Now, it's important to remember that the map is not the territory. Just because we have a map of something doesn't mean that's what the actual territory looks like. But based on our five senses, we develop a map. And the older that we get, the more calcified that map gets. We tend to not stray from our habits and from our perspectives. This is not where the soul is. This is not where the higher self is. This is where the ego is. This is where the physical body is. All this is the part of self that will disintegrate eventually, for an absolute fact. So, becoming aware of this clouded version of higher self involves trying to see the actual territory despite the map. Now, how do you see the territory despite the map? Well, for one, you stop looking at your GPS and you start looking out the window. You start experiencing life for what it is without the filters that you habitually place on it. That means without your likes, without your dislikes, without your opinions, or without any of your preconceived notions. Because like I said in the first place, the soul is unconditioned consciousness. Conditioned consciousness is that map that you created. Let me know if that makes sense. Shango says, peace Shango. Shango says, is it correct to say that every objective viewpoint of the astral, heaven and hell, are obtained from a direct subjective experience of these places? I would say so, yes. Especially considering that it's kind of difficult to get an objective experience of these places. Shango says, which would mean that every explanation of these particular places comes from the mental construct of an individual's personal data input they've experienced within their incarnated lifetimes. Yes. More maps upon the territory. Quintessence Luminescence says, see the territory without the map. Disconnect from all, including the map weaved from lived experiences. Well done, Magus. Travis. Thank you. Indulgence in the sins of the flesh, which may not appear so bad when it is being done by a single person in an otherwise clean environment, will soon nauseate even its most hardened habitué when he is compelled to practice his chosen vice in company with thousands of others who are all doing exactly the same thing. And is not allowed to stop when he has had enough, because the irresistible momentum carries him on willy-nilly. Willy-nilly. This is the most effectual way to cure the sins of the flesh, and the lords of karma make full use of it. That image there reminds me of Hellraiser, especially Hellraiser 2, where the extremely lustful individuals are taken to a place where they lust until it hurts. Dion Fortune says, according to the lords of karma, that may be the best way to cure the sins of the flesh. Shingo says, so to truly gain the individual's definition, one has to go there themselves. And only the way of death can explain death. Absolutely. Like what she said earlier, we as adults are to death just as children, babies, are to birth. If, however, a soul has largely risen above its weakness during life, or if it is not very deeply imbued with them, its visit to the purgatorial fiery whirlpool will be brief, for its struggle to resist the current will soon cause it to be thrown out upon the bank, free. None, however, may escape the experience of facing their own weaknesses in the company of those like-minded to themselves. No amount of masses and candles and prayers can spare them this. We can, however, concentrate upon souls a telepathic current, which shall focus spiritual forces upon them, and thus cause them to win to a realization and reaction more quickly. In brief, we can apply spiritual healing to the souls in purgatory. Many people endure great anxiety concerning the fate of some loved one who has died in sin and unrepentant. It may be a great comfort to them to know that spiritual healing forces can be applied just as effectually to souls in purgatory as absent treatment can be given to souls in incarnation. Let us always remember that if we can communicate telepathically during life, we shall have no difficulty in communicating telepathically after death. For if minds can communicate without material means, while both are upon earth, the position will not be materially affected when one of the pair has no longer got any material means wherewith to communicate, but has to rely exclusively upon the mind. One of the occult disciplines consists in reviewing each night the events of the day in the reverse order, that is to say, from the evening to the morning. Although this may be a little confusing at first, for the mind naturally attempts to follow its habitual sequence of cause and effect, one soon becomes habituated to it and experiences no difficulty. There is a twofold reason for this operation. The first is to accustom the mind to work out of its normal sequence, and so enabled it to penetrate the veil of birth and recover memories of past incarnations. And the other is to keep the karmic debt within bounds. By abreacting each day any errors we may have made, we prevent our purgatorial debt from accumulating. Of course, if we merely abreact them each day and repeat them again the next, we are not doing ourselves much good. For although we may have neutralized that particular portion of our karma, we are acquiring plenty more of an even more unpleasant nature, for we are making sure of a place for ourselves in the hell reserved for hypocrites. And anything more painful than the unmasking of a hypocrite to the depths of his selfish and cowardly soul it is hard to imagine. The mills of God grind exceeding small, and not so slowly either, all things considered. Let us always bear in mind, however, that purgatory is neither punitive nor retributive, but essentially healing to the soul. The cautery of fire clears up the septic wounds that life has left us. There is clean healing after that burning. Let us therefore, during our lifetime, clear up all we can of those things we have done amiss, whether in wickedness, error, or weakness. If we can cure ourselves of our evil tendencies, purgatory will not have to teach us our lessons, for we shall have already learnt them. And finally, when our time comes to die, let us go over with courage, knowing that our evil dream will not last long. Going to our purgatory as we would go to the dentist, knowing that it is going to be more or less painful, but not more than flesh and blood can bear, and be none the worse for it. And let us, above all, realize that we are in skilled hands. Oh. Hmm. All right, so I suppose we'll do one more. We'll do the heaven world. We'll do the heaven world. And then we'll finish up the rest next time. All right, you guys with me to do chapter 11, the heaven world? I mean, we read about hell, we read about purgatory. It's only right to balance things out, right? We've done Tamas, we've done Rajas, now we're gonna do Sattva. Again, we've got more people here than there are likes on the video. So if you're here and you like this content, you might as well hit the like button. In fact, I'm asking you to hit the like button. Please do so if you have not already. All right, give me just a second. This feels like a good breaking point. I'll be right back. see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Chapter 11, The Heaven World. We hear a great deal about the heaven world in spiritualistic communications, and many people are repulsed by the idea, for they feel that everything is represented as being so material. They read of Raymond smoking cigars and drinking champagne and feel that heaven falls short of their expectations. Or again, they read of a golden floor and perpetual harping and feel that this would not appeal to them either. A rather higher type of heaven is described by the spirits, who tell us that the artist paints marvelous pictures upon illimitable canvas, or the scientist penetrates the secrets of nature by merely looking at them. Delightful as everything is made to sound, we feel instinctively that there is something wrong, for all this does not ring true. Moreover, we feel that we should be thoroughly bored, even if it were true, for there is no pleasure in an age-long, effortless perfection. So much of our joy and achievement lies in the triumph of difficulties to overcome. There can be no such joy in an effortless heaven. There's no pleasure in an age-long, effortless perfection. So much of our joy and achievement lies in the triumph of difficulties to overcome. For many people, too, there could be no joy in a heaven that did not include their loved ones. Now, what are we to say to all these contradictory statements which do violence? There she goes again with doing violence to something. And what are we to say to all these contradictory statements which do violence to our deepest instincts? They cannot all be right. But nevertheless, are they all wrong? How are we to understand them? First of all, we must realize heaven is a state of consciousness, not a place. Please highlight that. Heaven is a state of consciousness, not a place. Pure mind is independent of time and space, as we know by our dreams, whether the dream of sleep or the daydream. We can fantasy ourselves to be in ancient Egypt or far Cathay. What is far Cathay? We can fantasy ourselves to be in ancient Egypt or far Cathay, and for all the purposes of consciousness, we are here for the moment. We see the sights, we hear the sounds of these times and places in proportion to the vividness of our imagination. We see the sights, we hear the sounds of these times and places in proportion to the vividness of our imagination. When we are first dead, we are simply disembodied minds and obey the laws of dream consciousness. Purgatory is our dream of remorse and purification, and the heaven world is our wish fulfillment. Freud tells the story of the little boy whose ration of cherries was limited by a careful mother, and who, on awakening the next morning, announced, "Herman has eaten all the cherries." His dream had fulfilled the ungratified wish of the previous day. So in the sleep of death, the dreams that come to us during our heaven world phase, she called it a phase. What does that indicate? Check that out. So, in the sleep of death, the dreams that come to us during our heaven world phase are wish fulfillments. We grow natural family, peace. Yes, yes. So, in the sleep of death, the dreams that come to us during our heaven world phase are wish fulfillments, but they are something more than the idle gratification of fancy. They arise from the deep brooding of the mind upon its hopes and ideals. These may not seem to us very lofty, but they represent the phase of experience through which that particular soul is going in its evolution. And it may be necessary for that soul to go through the realization of its hopes in order to profit by the lesson. The Muslim heaven, with its houri, may not appeal to the Westerner, but it has been potent to send thousands of fanatical devotees to a sacrificial death in order that their faith might be spread among the infidels, and that faith has been a greater force for good among tribes so primitive that they could not respond to a more sophisticated appeal. We must not judge another man's heaven by our own standards. His heaven is his wish fulfillment, not ours. We must face the fact that the cat burglar's heaven would be full of easily climbed porches. When we call back the spirits of the departed to tell us of their experiences in the heaven world, whither they have gone, we are listening to the account of their dreams in the sleep of death. It is only when we are fortunate enough to get hold of one of the souls that are freed from the wheel of birth and death and are continuing their beneficent work for humanity upon the inner planes instead of entering into their rest. In other words, it is only when we get into touch with a master that we shall hear an account of the heaven world that shall give us a real understanding of its nature and the relation of its parts to the whole. Society Eject says, yep, the movie What Dreams May Come came to mind when I was reading this chapter. The account which is given by a person recently passed over is comparable to the account that is given of the working of a great hospital by one of the patients in its bed. He sees only a very small portion of the whole and has no means of assessing its significance. The account which is given by the guides, ministering spirit friends, and others whose task it is to assist the departed is equivalent to that which we might receive from the probationer nurses of the same hospital. It is not until we hear the doctors lecturing to the students that we begin to grasp the significance and scope of the great institution we are investigating. Purgatory is a hospital for sick souls, where they are operated upon. The heaven world is first a convalescent home and then a school. For some few, it may also be a college. In the lower fields of heaven, so often described in communications from the inner planes, souls rest and recuperate, dreaming pleasant dreams, meanwhile that soothe them and make them happy. But this phase, having fulfilled its purpose, passes off and gives place to the next. In order to understand the significance of these inter-incarnation phases, we must enter somewhat deeply into the philosophy of the subject. As we have already noted, heaven and equally hell are states of consciousness, not places. But if we realize the actual facts of the matter, we shall find that Earth is also a state of consciousness. crispy. Modern physics is showing conclusively that matter is simply a form of force, which, owing to the fact that it is in equilibrium, appears to us to be static. There's no such thing as dense matter as properly understood. When you bark your shins over the coal scuttle, you are really falling over electrical resistances. Incarnation is the state of consciousness which perceives these forms of force. Oh my. Discarnation, or death, is the state of consciousness which no longer perceives them, but has become subjective, and is only aware of the content of its own consciousness. Now that deserves a highlight of a different color. So we've got incarnation, which is being in a state of consciousness where we perceive these electromagnetic forces objectively. Disincarnation is when we enter into a state of consciousness that no longer perceives objectivity as objective, but our consciousness becomes subjective, and we're only aware of the content of our own consciousness. Let me say that one more time in a different way. Incarnation is a state of consciousness which perceives forms of force. So force, which is ever existent, is perceived as form while we're in this state of incarnation. She says disincarnation is when our consciousness becomes subjective and we are only aware of the content of our own consciousness. Sheesh. Sheesh. Indigo Blackbird says, now my question is, how do we know if we've gotten in touch with a master? I don't think that we will know unless it is necessary for us to know. I think that these so-called masters have some big hands on this chessboard, and unless it is a requirement for us to know about these hands, then we only speculate. But I'm sure many people have been touched by those hands. Also, it's good to remember that the seed makes itself evident in the fruit. So having a master come into contact with you, your peace, oath, peace. So yeah, in the book, Winter Soldier says, I'm guessing the book Power versus Force comes in handy. I would say so, but more accurately, I would say the Mystical Kabbalah, because she references the two extreme pillars of mercy and severity as the pillars of force and form. The masculine pillar being that of force, the feminine pillar being that of form. And all these Sephiroths as states of consciousness. Which is why I was kind of thinking and looking when she mentioned that lustful sphere or that angry sphere, right? I'm thinking, okay, sphere, this kind of ties into maybe the clip-off and how each of the cliphotic spheres can be named after, some of humanity's shortcomings. And also on what you mentioned about coming into contact with the master, also reference Mystical Kabbalah, the chapter where she was describing Chesed, the Jupiter sphere. And she mentioned that communication and contact between first off, she said that that's where the masters reside. These these souls, these consciousnesses who have gone through all the trials and tribulations and have made it to a certain level where they occupy a very unique position of authority, um, and they remain in contact with the people of Malkuth through the people of Had. Now, what that means in regular terms is these masters are in connection with students or schools, right? So, just as an example, you could say the Bihar school, you could say the Golden Dawn, right? Certain of these schools have members who are in contact with a specific master. And these schools produce students who make great changes within the world. And that great change is a fruit of a seed that was planted in great teachers of these schools. So typically you'll find great masters in contact with certain societies who make it a point to dig deep into esoteric knowledge. Now, is the Bihar school or a Golden Dawn in touch with the master? I don't know, but I'm using them as examples, right? The Theosophical Society with Madame Blavatsky, right? She made claims of being in direct connection with a master. And through that direct connection, those teachings were able to produce students that made great change in the world. So if you want to look at it, to answer your question, your first question, if you want to see the indication of a master at work or being in connection or influence with people, look at what the school has done in the world, or look at what kind of impact they've made on society. What comes to mind for me is like, say, the Nation of Islam. Hell, even Malachi's New York. Let's continue, as we are almost finished. Incarnation is the state of consciousness which perceives these forms of force. Discarnation, or death, is the state of consciousness which no longer perceives them, but has become subjective and is only aware of the content of its own consciousness. In death, the gates of the senses are closed. Otherwise, the man is unchanged. In fact, we might say that, viewed from the standpoint of the soul, death is simply the closing of the gates of the senses. Death is simply the closing of the gates of the senses. If a man's consciousness is entirely limited to the 5 physical senses, though such men are rare, he is as much shut in with his own thoughts and is as inaccessible as the sleeper lying oblivious on a bed. Peace, Black Knight. Black Knight says, will the clip-off be more of the death realm? In all caps. I would say yes, but probably not like what you're thinking. I would say yes, but I'm gonna go ahead and make an educated assumption, not like what you're thinking. The realm of the clip-off can be thought of as the realm of processes of life the law of, excuse me, the realm of processes of life and the realm of things and ideas, concepts, and actions that are no longer necessary, that are no longer useful or appropriate. So, in that respect, yes, those forms of life are now dead because they are no longer necessary. We can say, for example, if the dinosaurs was a real thing, then they would be relegated to the clip off because they are no longer useful or appropriated on the planet. Therefore, they are extinct. You can think of the clip off as the realm of things that are extinct and no longer necessary. Now, however, that doesn't mean that this is a place that is useless. In fact, there very well may be some things in this realm that are the most useful. Message Shango about that. Look into that book, what's it called? Kabbalah Clip Off and the Goetia by Thomas Carlson. For example, polio is in the clip off because that's not a disease. Smallpox is in the clip off. Thank you, Society Ejects. I appreciate you. Have a good evening, Cosmic Traveler. All right, let's continue. Okay, so Tian Palmore says useful question mark. Let me clean up my words. So I said that the clip off is the realm of that which is no longer useful or appropriate. I then said, however, that doesn't mean that it's not entirely useless. To rephrase that, the clip off is a realm of things that is no longer useful and appropriate for the evolution of life. It's no longer useful and appropriate for the evolution of consciousness in the material plane. However, for the individual seeker, there may be information, there may be knowledge, there may be data that can be made of use. But you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Yeah, I think that's a better way of saying it. All right, here we go. Let's finish up. Oh, cool. I can heart the super chat now. Shango says, but if you're not looking for needles, yeah. Right. You've got to have a very specific reason to go digging in the clip off, the cosmic porta potty. You got to have a very specific reason for doing that. If you're just doing it because it's dark and it's spooky and cool and you think that's where the demons are or whatever, you might not be happy with the results. Mainly because you won't find much that you can do anything with. You have to go in with an intention that's bigger than I want to tap into some dark, spooky spirits, right? You got to have something bigger than that. Society Eject says, weird question, but do you know what those people that always talk about what they used to do, would you say they pull in from the clip off? Maybe you could clarify, but I'm gonna assume you're talking about people who used to say like, yeah, man, I could have gone pro back when I was back in football and high school in 1982, man, I could have been pro, or that kind of talk. That's definitely a clip off. Shango says, go in there and get bullied and accosted. Right. You might not be happy. Because the clip off is not the place for that. That's not the place for that. You can go somewhere else for that. But yeah, you're exactly right, Society Ejects. People that's like, yeah, man, back, I could have been pro back in da 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 da. And like, it's one thing to bring up memories for a story or to live through, to experience nostalgia. But I know what you're talking about. It's people that are stuck there, right? Stuck in high school or stuck in whatever great achievement of the past. That is definitely a mind stuck in the clip off, because that's a place that doesn't exist anymore. All right, let's finish this up. It's funny, but it's also sad. You guys remember that scene from what's that movie? Napoleon Dynamite, where that dude, with the football, and he talks about how he could have gone pro, and you can see in his eyes how he's just like looking back to the past of a future that never happened. It's rough, man. Shango says you can go to a billiards hall or to a pool hall. You know the difference. MC Maestro says there is a function of the clip off of pulling down something completely new, but it's not something to tap into unless you understand how precisely your reality is constructed and what purpose these things serve. Excellent point. Excellent point. There's plenty of spooky, dark side, cool things to deal with on this side of reality. You don't have to venture to the clip off to get that, because you probably won't recognize it if you saw it. Like listen to H.P. Lovecraft and his audiobooks, or actually read his books. A lot of those entities and creatures are from the clip off. He talks about these entities that are from a past that is so distant, it's horrifying to behold, right? Imagine how old a creature has to be. The form of these entities are so ancient, billions of years old, that there weren't any human beings to comprehend them at any time. So for them to interact with our modern world, it causes insanity immediately. All right, let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Shango says those types of consciousnesses are places you don't stay long. It's like Diagon Alley in Harry Potter. Buy and leave. Society Eject says, heck yeah, I'm gonna keep it 100. I can't fully understand the front side of the tree, so I'm not playing with the clip off. Yeah. All right. Let us continue. MC Maestro says you can create a succinct incarnation of an idea using the clip off, but people end up falling out Frankenstein. People end up pulling out Frankenstein monsters. The clip off act like archetypal resource pools. Yeah. Shango says a lot of times people live in the clip off and don't even know that they are there. Shells holding on to a time that no longer exists. That's rough. All right, I keep saying let's continue, but we keep talking about this clip off, man. See? Where we at? But does this sleep of death yield nothing but pleasant dreams and rest? No, it does much more than this. Anyone who is familiar with the practice of mental work and meditation knows how powerful is the concentrated brooding of the mind upon some spiritual ideal. The highlands of heaven are the mounts of meditation. The soul, withdrawn from sense impressions, is building thought forms and giving itself autosuggestion. The soul, withdrawn from sense impressions, withdrawn from the five senses, is building thought forms and giving itself autosuggestion. Autosuggestion in front of God and everybody. Soul. These processes play an important part in formulating the vehicles of embodiment when the time comes for it to reincarnate. The artist who dreams his dream of cosmic canvases is building faculty. On Earth, the realization of his vision was limited by the skill of hand and eye. In the heaven world, he is under no such limitations, and bodies forth his vision as he sees it. This trains faculty, and when he reincarnates, he will have gone some way towards building himself a physical vehicle in which hand and eye will cooperate with the inner vision and give it form. Ooh. The artist who dreams his dream of cosmic canvases is building faculty. On Earth, the realization of his vision was limited by the skill of a hand and eye. In the heaven world, this is good news for us artists, right? This is good news for us visionaries. In the heaven world, he is under no such limitations and bodies forth his vision. I'm about to body that vision. He bodies forth his vision as he sees it. This trains faculty, and when he reincarnates, he will have gone some way towards building himself a physical vehicle in which hand and eye will cooperate with the inner vision and give it life. And to give it form, inner vision to give it form. Life after life of effort, together with the intervening periods of meditation on the inner planes, gradually make the soul that which it wishes to be. Oh, I love that. Think about that. All of you who are artists and creators, we know the struggle where you have a vision in your head and you try your best to put it out into the world, but it's never exactly what you saw. Like sometimes maybe, but you ever have a vision that's so big you don't even have the materials, like you wouldn't even know where to look to be able to put it together in the way that you see it, right? This is one of the reasons why I love working with this AI right now, because it does offer me expanded methods than I would have with, say, Photoshop or anything else. But even it's not perfect. You gotta wrestle with that stuff. You gotta wrestle with it to get something close to what you want. It's getting better though. But imagine being completely liberated from all constraints and restrictions, being able to actually produce and replicate that which you see. Life after life of effort, together with the intervening periods of meditation on the inner planes, gradually make the soul what it wishes to be. If its wishes are unworthy or untrue, the regularly recurring spells of purgatory neutralize its efforts. Like Penelope's web, that which is woven by day is unpicked by night. Those things which in our earth life we have realized but failed to attain are achieved in heaven. Well, that's a relief. This subjective achievement builds faculty, and we return to incarnation with the power to achieve latent in us. Life has done its work for us when it brings realization, even if we are unable to achieve our realizations. For the next life, these will be within our grasp. Now, to keep it real, this would also explain any skills, talents, and gifts that you have this time around. What you're able to do today is what you wish you could have done last time, but may not have had the full capacity. MC Maestro says, I'd argue the aspect of Akash, that of the vehicle of the unknown instead of the specifics, is the clip-off. Much like the chaos sphere in Psychonaut is said to not be brought to the novices. I can see that. I can see that. Malkuth and Kether being the same. And I think that's why there is potential benefit pulling from the clip-off, because it can be equally futile for somebody to reach for Kether as it is to reach down to the clip-off, because we're reaching towards information that won't fit into the current reality, right? Reaching back into the clip-off, you're reaching for stuff that doesn't fit into modern times. And reaching to Kether, you're reaching out to something that doesn't have a place yet, which is one of the functions of the masters. They help to create space in modern reality for what is to come. Again, that's why I said the seed planted. I'm telling you, go back to Mystical Kabbalah and read that chapter where she's talking about chesed. They have to do with planting seeds, the seeds that they sift out of Doth. If you look at the tree and you see the unique position of chesed, it's positioned right there at Doth. And what comes through Doth is the bare minimum seeds of reality from Kether. Chesed has the first grasp. These masters have the first pick at what comes out of Kether, and they distribute it to those students through Tifereth into Hod, the mystery school, and they then plant it into the general public. Everything that we have now as a part of our everyday life came from some secret society who channeled it and introduced it into the general public. Look at everything, every single thing. Well, that was that. We're going to finish this book next time. Shengo says, shattered fragments, so small in importance that they have no real use. That could apply to both the clip-off and to Kether. Akash, seed, egg. Oath says, hey Trav, what are your thoughts on chess and do you play? I was just asked that yesterday. I think that chess is a very nice and fun game. I haven't played it in a long time, but it's cool. I think if I did put effort into it, I could get really good at it. But yeah, it's a cool game. All right, everybody. This was Saturday night, and we read through some pretty interesting chapters of this book. I hope that you got some useful thoughts. And ultimately, I hope that you're doing well these days. Me, myself, I'm going to get back to my video creation as I have quite a few videos to do. I hope you guys check out some of my AI experiments. I'm teaching myself how to use these programs so that I can get really good at it. I think it's a lot of fun, to be honest. But yeah, I won't hold you up for too long. Time for me to go. All right, I hope you guys had a great night, and I will see you next time. For sure. For sure. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you guys. Peace.